Deterrence works if a dispute doesn't take place, and it's hard to say when a dispute doesn't take place. You have to say what would have happened if there wasn't this situation, then we would have had a dispute. That's why it becomes complicated, and that's why I'm talking about potential target and potential challenger. Country diet just means country A, country B, and it's, I'll talk in a second about diets, but this just means a relationship between two countries, one country being the potential challenger and one being the potential target. And military interstate dispute, as I said before, is just that kind of dispute that is not necessarily war. Now, yes, we can talk about the boundaries of this theory. So the big issue here is that, as I was telling before, these are about potential challenger. So now what happens if the challenger becomes, from a potential challenger, an actual challenger? Now, that kind of theory is actually called the immediate deterrence theory. So the things that I've explained so far regard general deterrence theory. So how you prevent a potential challenger from becoming an actual challenger. But immediate deterrence theory is, suppose there is a challenger already in place. How do you prevent that from escalating to war level? And in that case, there might be different aspects of the theory that come in hand. Maybe an alliance is actually, if you sign an alliance after a challenge has been issued, this may create a worse scenario. If you think about it, a clear example is World War I. You know, there is rivalry between Germany, France, Germany, Russia, Austria, Russia, and so on. Now, while there is this rivalry, nothing happens at the beginning, but then alliance treaties are signed between the different powers, and the situation precipitates. Germany gives guarantees to Austria, France and Russia sign their own treaty, and they pull in Britain. So the situation worsens, and the chances of war become higher, and eventually, this is something called the security dilemma. It is a spiral of tension that has led to war. So that's a case of immediate deterrence, in which alliances have only worsened the situation. And the second boundary is that some adversaries are undeterrable. So there are cases in which a country is so dissatisfied with the status quo that it will be willing to launch an attack, even though a third party ensures defense or protection for the potential target. So in that situation, deterrence doesn't help at all, and in this whole thing doesn't make much difference. That's why I'm talking about other things equal. It also includes that adversaries should be deterrable. There is a possibility that they may be deterred by a certain kind of signals. For example, a state might be deterred by a very formalized treaty that establishes a permanent organization and a military command and so on, but it may not be deterred if the treaty is less formal, for example. And so that's the situation that will lead to a change in the probability of dispute initiation. And I do that, yes, by looking at this data set. We can talk about them. One is a data set that quotes alliances and the treaties as provisions, and the second one codes disputes the way I defined them before. It's a set of complications in defining all this, and I agree, but this is what is, let's say, on the table, so that's what I'm able to use. Now, I was talking about diet years. Specifically, I would like to use the directed diet year. It means that in this dataset there is one entry for the relation between the US and China in 1991 and the US and China in 1992. In this situation, the US is the potential challenger and China is the potential target. But if China launches an attack on the US, then China becomes the challenger and the US the target. So that's why there is another entry for China-US 1991 and China-US 1992. That's what I mean with directed diet year. This is the total of observation. That basically the threshold is this one, that the potential target always has a defense pact. So offense pacts don't count, no defense pacts at all doesn't count. Needs to be a defense pact, and these defense pacts vary in a variety of things. They can vary in balance of power, they can vary in accountability, whether they have neutral deterrent, whether they have foreign policy similarity. So these are all controls, but what I'm interested in is how they vary in terms of formality. And for those of you who are interested in statistics, these are the results. So just So I show you these. Basically, what was it? Forget about these weird words like probit, modal, random effects. The only thing I want to show is that here there is a negative sign and there are some stars. The negative sign means that the effect is indeed deterrent, means that it lowers the probability of dispute initiation, and the stars mean that it is significant. So according to statistical techniques, this is different from zero. So that's the only thing that you need to know about this. Then we can talk about the design. If you have any criticism or comments, I'm happy to do it. But for the sake of it, let's just put it this way. So at the moment, it seems that the level of formality of alliance, by which I mean consultation provisions, the pact is open and public, and there is a certain degree of organization that can vary from simple consultation pacts to a permanent staff. This has a negative impact on the MID initiation. Peacetime military coordination, whether the alliance has a permanent military command, whether there is a common defense policy, whether the forces of one state are subordinated to those of another state in the alliance, also has a negative effect. And summing these two, an overall level of formality also gives a negative effect. And if you want to look at something a little bit more substantive, this is just the probability of dispute initiation according to different level of formality. So the black part means this is the probability of dispute initiation between a potential target, between a potential challenger and a potential target, when the level of formality of the alliance is 0, so very low. You see, the probability at the moment is 1.5%, and you may wonder, why is it so low? Why do we care? Well, the reason why it is very low is that there are 500,000 observations, and there are very few disputes in history. There are some states like Cabo Verde and Cambodia that are very unlikely to fight one against the other, right? But they are included in the data set, and we can talk about it, whether they should be or should not be included in a second. But so because there are all these diets, it's very low. The probability of dispute initiation at the beginning and conditional on all the variables I said before is already quite low. But if you increase the level of formality to 2, it already falls. And if you increase it further, it falls to 0.5%. So even though we're talking about very, very small numbers, they can make a difference, because it's the difference between peace and a dispute which may lead to war. So this is just to show that the probability does indeed fall. And that's the last thing, because I see that people are getting tired, and I understand them. Sorry for the beginning, the issues of the video, but I'm happy to show Dr. Strangelove. And for all of it, I would be happy if you guys destroy my thesis and everything, because all suggestions are more than welcome. Thank you guys.
Thank you, speaker. All right, and so as the slide says, any questions for Giuseppe?
How are you operationalizing formality?
Informality.
Yeah, with these different levels.
So they-
what are
okay.
the criteria?
So basically, first, for informality, you mean something that is not written down in the treaty, right? Is that what you mean? Or practice?
How when you're creating these different levels,
Uh-huh.
what categories are you including and distinguishing between these different levels?
Okay, formality. Okay, sorry, I thought about informality, which is basically, for me, informality is at the moment just a complement of formality. So what is categorized? So you mean the operationalization is that I don't have it over here, but it's just I put a series of indicators which are taken from this alliance treaty and obligation provision. First one is whether the alliance is public. So if it is signed in secret, that's already not a level of formality. It would score 0 level of formality. Then second is whether there are provisions for consultation. So if the two allies, two or more actually, promise to meet at specific agreed times to keep discussing the issues, in cases of crisis management or in cases of general security management. Then there is the issue of organization, whether the treaty establishes for meetings between heads of states or between lower ministerial meetings, or whether it establishes a coordination committee. Further, if it establishes a permanent organization with a secretariat, obvious cases later. This, again, is summed up and it gives an index that goes from 0 to 4, really. And then there's the index of peacetime military coordination. That shows, so the alliance scores 2 in that index if it has a joint integrated military command, it has the subordination of forces by one state to another state, or if the alliance provides for common defense policy coordination. Then if it doesn't have any of these 3, but it scores 1 in subordination of forces or presence of bases of one state, in which troops of one state can station on the other state, and a couple of other things that I need to check, but I can get back to you, then that leads to peacetime military coordination. That's it. Again, this goes from 0 to 2, so summing 4 and 2 gets to an index that goes from 0 to 6. That's how I operationalize it. Obviously, the question is, that's written down in the treaty. How do you know that it's going to be the case throughout time? That's something that the treaty cannot answer. But I try to give 2 answers to that criticism, which is well put. So the first answer is that I believe that through the mechanism of costs and benefits that I was showing before, there is a possibility that there is a higher chance that states will live up to these commitments because of the sunk cost and audience cost and the benefits that come out of it. And second, I am going to try to, for the second half of the thesis, to look at more concrete example. So one example is to look at NATO in integrated military command and the nuclear planning group, and then take a similar alliance which has the same main country, the US, in a similar scenario, the Cold War, but varies in terms of the military structure and the formality level, which is the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization. Obviously you can say, but that's Asia and that's Europe. Yes, that's also, I need to consider that, but I'm trying to see whether beyond these differences, which exist and are important, there is something that can be said about the treaty proper. So if indeed what you write down matters or not.
So you're looking at probability of initiation of dispute,
yes,
right? And you talked to us about the data you're using. Can you very briefly simply explain the algorithm that you get the probability out of?
Okay, so basically, you're asking whether you're asking about the probit model or something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
So how do you get the data essentially?
Yeah, okay. So how do I get the data? It's been by a lot of manipulation of the data. So you can construct a list, there are softwares that generate the list of countries from a given year to another year. Then you can add to that a series of covariates. For example,
but how did you define the gravity of each variance? Like
the gravity?
Yeah, like the weight of how...
Okay, so basically, no, this all comes, basically, there are a lot of software and a lot of data gathering process that has been taken and included and I take the variables from each, then I build myself my own variables. Now the whole process is a probit model or a logic model that simply tries to define, it's a non-linear probability model that shows basically the outcome is either dispute or no dispute. So it tries to model the probability of the outcome variable being 0 or 1 as a function of these covariates. And obviously this happens, you can do that via logit model, which is a logistic regression. So it means that the variables are taken from an expression that is then operationalized as the odds ratio of the outcomes that have 1 dispute and the outcomes that have 0 dispute. And then you take the logarithm out of it. And that will show here. This would be the logarithm of the odds ratio. It's not the case here. This is a probit model. The probit model means that the variables are connected, the variable function are connected to the normal distribution with a z-score. So basically this means this is the distance from 0. You know, this is 3.1 is beyond the third standard deviation. So it's at a level of distance from the mean that is statistically significant. And that's direct because it's easier to compute probabilities from this, because this is a z-score, normal distribution. So if you know about that, you divide it by, you multiply by standard deviation and then divide by the mean. subtract them. No, so wait, subtract the mean and then divide by standard deviation and then add the mean. That's how you do it. That's how you would get the probability. Is that clear?
You use three actors, so there's the challenger,
Yes.
the ally, and the target.
Yes.
Cannot be only two challengers, a treaty between two challengers has the deterrent effect. I'll make you an example. They are talking now, there is a treaty between America and Russia since Simon Gorbachev, and Trump wants to get out of it.
Pull out of it.
That's a treaty, it has a deterrent effect. That include a direct
It may as
between
well.
two challenges.
I understand that's closer to being. I would have say that that's closer to a non-aggression pact. So, and I believe the non-aggression logic is a little bit different from the alliance logic. The alliance logic is a treaty between two states that are aimed at conflict, at managing conflict with external actors, whether beginning a war, offensive pact, or deterring a war, defensive pact. What you're saying is the non-aggression pacts, which to me sounds like two states or two actors signing a treaty aimed at managing conflict among them. So it is to manage internal conflict. Now, the non-aggression pacts are important, they are growing. Actually, the majority of treaties in recent times, especially since the end of the Cold War, are non-aggression pacts. Russia signed like 100 non-aggression pacts in a few years, with every single one of the former Eastern European states and with all the former NATO countries. So this is very interesting. But because the fact it is aimed at look at deterring, not at external deterrence, but maybe internal deterrence, that might be a different topic. That it has been that there is a literature that deals with that, which I can show you if you want. It is, but it's obviously an interesting thing. I think the non-aggression pacts follow a little bit of a different logic. But that's actually points at something that I've thought and I've not yet included. I don't know if I'll be able to include it in this paper, which is specifically the fact that a treaty, even though it's deterrent outside, so it's an alliance treaty, can also have internal deterrent effects, managing conflict between allies. And my idea is try to develop a formal model that shows that the more formalized treaties are better able both at external deterrence and at internal deterrence. But that would mean, and there is a slightly more complicated version of the tree diagram and decision trees I showed you before, slightly in the sense that it has all 8 outcomes, so it's a little bit more, a bit longer, and I don't know if it works. And I don't know if I'll be able to use it, but then I will need to do for the coding, all the coding again, but for potential challengers, right? So show that the idea would be that a more formalized treaty will also prevent a challenger from launching an attack, not just from being a potential target, in a sense. But that's a whole different, well, it's connected, it's not the same story, but I would say that it's, at the moment, it's not included in here. But I hope I was clear in all this. There are multiple explanations, potential explanations I could give for that.
All right, so since we're running out of time a bit, let's thank the speaker again. And feel free to discuss with Giuseppe, because I hope he'll stick around for dinner.
Yeah.
But feel free to talk with
I'm hungry.
ask any questions to Giuseppe. And thanks again, thanks to all of you for coming.
Thank you, guys.
And again, there's a seminar every Monday this term, so if you have nothing to do at 5 p.m. on Monday, come support your fellow Kellogg student. Thank
See
you.
you next time.
Caroline.